Welcome to the Swedish Junior Hockey Podcast. My name is Jacob Dahlin. With us today is the third and almost final member of the Karlsson family, Lucas Karlsson. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
This episode is brought to you by Scandlux, your home for Scandinavian luxury products for the U.S. market. You can find us at scandlux.com.
So we've had your father was the first recording, and he was in a car driving up to Pittsburgh. I think he was going to watch you play, and then we had your brother Jack on. So hopefully we got better connection than when we had your dad on, because he was in the car and we got disconnected 5 times, I think.
Yeah, we should have a better connection now.
That's right. So before we go into your background, you are right now in New Jersey, right?
Yes. I'm
in between practices, probably.
Pretty much.
Okay. So give us a little bit about your background. Yes, we got a little bit of a lag here. Give us a little bit of your background and how you ended up in New Jersey.
Well, we moved to the U.S. about 3 years ago when my parents got a job here, and I liked the hockey over here too from what I saw, so I decided to go with them. Started up with playing at where we lived. Wasn't the best hockey, but definitely helped me experience the first year. You speak English with everyone and play a decent hockey. Then we decided to make the move to play at Little Caps, Washington Little Caps, which is AAA, which is the highest youth hockey you can play here. And then I decided to follow my brother's footsteps to come here and play 18s and hopefully make the NAHL team.
And for those who didn't listen to, I should have pulled up which episode it was, but if you go back to, it's been a few months ago, we released the episode with Jack, who played North American Hockey League with the New Jersey Titans. But you're currently playing in the same organization, but in their U18 AAA program, right?
Yes, I am.
Tell us a little bit about that, because I think that's I know I'm going to jump a little bit back and forth here, but since we're on that subject, how does that work where the ownership has the NAHL team, and are they affiliated, or do they have a NA3 team as well?
Yes, they do. They do have an NA3 team as well.
Is that the Titans? Yeah, that is the Titans as well, right?
Yeah, the New Jersey Titans as well.
Okay. So, and your brother, of course, played last year in the NAHL? Time flies.
Yes, last year. Yes, last year.
Yeah, last year.
Oh, yeah.
And then he's playing D3, NCAA D3 now. So, yeah, good. You already have familiarity there, of course. So let's talk a little bit about
absolutely.
When you got over here to the U.S., the last year that you played was U15 in Sweden, right? Or U16?
So I was U14, but I did play up with the U16 before I left. Yeah.
All right. How was it to come over as a 14-year-old, 14, 15, into a new country?
It was very hard at first. Very hard to get used to both the language and to play the new hockey.
What was the hardest?
Probably the rink size, I would say. To get used to the rink size when you get over here first.
What was the biggest difference? I mean, I know it's smaller, but was it just a lot more dump and change? And
I would say it's a lot more faster. It's so fast because of the rink size.
Yeah.
And I would say a lot more skills. There's not as much passing in Sweden as in Sweden. There's more skilled guys who can do a guy. And
more challenging one-on-one.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, versus pass around. So and when I pull up your elite prospects before we got on this call, it's interesting. Of course, you grew up in Leksand, or you grew up in Köping, but played. How many years were you in Leksand?
So we moved from Köping to Leksand when I was 9, and we stayed there till I was 14.
Okay. And of course, for those who don't know, the premier program in Sweden is Leksand.
Yeah.
Not biased at all in that area.
No.
So take us back there a little bit. So what grade were you in when you moved?
I think I was in 5th grade when we
Okay.
moved to Leksand.
So, and then you stayed until 8th grade?
Yes, something like that, yeah.
Okay. So, and for those who hasn't been to that, what's it like to be playing hockey at Tegera Arena or in the practice rink there and go to school, even though you didn't go to hockey gymnasium there because you left before that?
It was great. So like I've always been a Leksand fan even since I was a little kid, and then so we moved there, and it was perfect. And they have a really good setup there too. So even though you don't go to hockey gymnasium, you can still skate during school time, even though you're in 7th or 8th grade. They have a connection with the school. That's great.
So unlimited amount of ice time with the team and without the team.
Absolutely. Yes, we had a lot of ice time.
And if you pull up the players that are on that U16 team, what's interesting is that there's 40 players on that roster.
Yeah, it's a lot of different kids that played games on that roster.
And that's pretty common. And there's a lot of them just like you. You were 14. You got 3 games to play with the U16s. But what happens is the U16, those guys that were playing the majority of the games were also playing U18.
Yeah, they did.
And some pretty big names in here. I mean, I see Eric Hultgren in here, who's playing J20 National now. Tuva Kandel, who's played with the women's SDHL team for several years, and with the national team as well. Anybody else that you remember from back in those days that were studs?
It would be all of my 05 friends, like Felix and probably Eric's little brother. They were always great players to play with, and I think Felix is playing J18 in Leksand right now.
Is that Felix Unger?
Yes.
Let's pull him up right quick. Yep.
That's one of my old best friends that I've always loved to play with.
Yeah, so of course he's actually played a couple of games with the Swedish U18 national, but 05 birth year, only played 1 game with the U18s and 23 games with the J20 national.
Yeah, he's doing great.
Yeah. Probably, is he in the draft year this year?
I think he's a late 05.
Okay,
if I'm not
so
wrong.
he may be next year's draft class. So
absolutely,
yeah. So were you did you leave before you had the chance to be in the TV puck tournament?
Yeah, I left what is it, a year, 2 years before.
Yeah, but I'm sure everybody at that time were like, oh yeah, I want to make the TV puck tournament. I want to make the TV puck tournament.
Oh yeah, a lot of talking about that tournament.
And I see Simon Daniels, it's actually one of my relatives. He's one of my son's teammates right now. Good player as well. All right, enough of that. So coming over to the U.S., new player, and then, so what's the significant then with the AAA versus, so the first year you were playing high school, and good transition, but then go straight into AAA with the Little Caps. Talk about that a little bit.
So AAA is uh, AAA is probably on the level to where the top U15 teams are in Sweden. You know, like they don't have they don't do it the same way here where you move up in age if you're good. They move up in levels instead.
Yeah.
So instead of moving up in age, you move up in levels. So AAA is the highest level in youth hockey.
How was it for you? Because you couldn't then play, and I think that was one of the big differences in the systems is, you know, there's no limits on which levels you can play in Sweden in terms of age. But so once you play on the Little Caps U15 AAA, you can't play on the U16 AAA, or you can't mix teams.
No, they usually won't move you up. They just keep you in U15.
So you play against the same age kids. It's just you're going to have to travel much further. So how was that in the beginning to, instead of getting on a bus ride for 20 minutes, now you're going to tournaments to Chicago and you're not staying in the DC area.
No, it's crazy. You know, in the beginning of the season, I think we went to Minnesota 2 weekends in a row, which is 2-hour flight, and it's a lot of travel.
Yeah. I'm sure your parents probably thought that was more crazy than you did. You probably thought it was fun.
I loved it, and they were like, "You're all over the place. You're going Boston now, Minnesota next weekend." Yeah, we used to travel all the time.
Yeah. All right, and then so you've been with the Little Caps for 3 seasons, but this year you kind of said, "All right, time to make another big move."
Yeah. And so I came.
Yeah, talk about that a little bit, because before this year you were living at home, and now first year living away from home.
Yeah, so I decided to go follow my brother, and you know, he had a great 2 years here, and they ended up winning the Robertson Cup. And so I thought I knew the coaches here. They seemed like a very good organization, and they had a good plan set up for me, was to come to play and practice, play games with the 18s, and then hopefully get a practice with the North American Hockey League team and maybe get a contract.
So what's the setup there with the U18s? How often do you practice?
We practice every day of the week. We have a skill session in the morning, workout, and then we have a team practice in the afternoon.
Okay. And then games on the weekend, right?
Yeah. Game this weekend, we play games from Saturday to Monday.
And typically then, so that's another big difference. Instead of playing one game on a Saturday or a Sunday, now you play 4 or 5 games in a showcase or something.
Yeah, it's a lot more games here.
Yeah. But then because you're an 05, you also had the ability to practice with the NAHL team throughout the season?
Yeah.
How does that work?
Yes. Our coaches, you know, they look at our practices, look who's looking good, and they send kids up to get the chance for the NA coach to take a look at you.
Okay. So what was the first time you did that? What was that like?
It was great. I mean, the coach told me, so you know, they have rules with what time of the year you can move players up, which is usually after the first Minnesota showcase. So yeah, I mean, it was great.
And we probably should have mentioned this earlier too. You're a defenseman, not a small guy.
No.
You're bigger than your brother, but you're 6'3". It looked like you've dropped some weight. I think earlier you were like 6'3", 220, and now it's Elite Prospects got you at 196.
Yeah. I had to drop a little bit, and they did so. So now we're looking good.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the first thing that I think people look at when they go to your profile, and they're going to say, "Wow, big for an 05."
Yeah.
You know, people say you can't teach size, so So that's good.
Yeah.
So lefty defenseman, 05, 6'3", 196, and they got you listed here with the Titans in here. But so have you traveled with the team just and dressed out just in play, or how does that work? That you're already up on there.
So no, when I after my 2 first weeks of practicing with them, they offered me the affiliation contract, which is basically how the pro contract is in Sweden. It's a 10-game contract, so you'll be rostered, but maybe not even travel with the team. So
Okay.
I have not been on that travel yet.
So let's go into this. I think it's interesting for those who are not as familiar with the process of, youth, which is U18 and below,
Yeah.
and then juniors and college and pros.
Yes.
So let's talk about what are your goals now, since you've had your older brother Jack kind of go through that process of moving from J20 over to directly into juniors with the Titans and is now playing in college. What are your goals?
My goal right now is to obviously make the North American Hockey League roster for the next season. Hopefully play there for the full 3 years that I'm available there and get scouted by a D1 school to commit to.
To an NCAA D1 school, right?
Yeah, that's the goal.
So how does it work? I mean, for you to get there, all right, why not then play at a tier 3 junior program this year? And instead you chose to play U18 AAA.
Yeah, so the reason I choose to play 18s, U18 here is because this organization actually really likes to do it the Swedish way and the European way. So
to move people up.
This organization don't mind moving people up and down the ages,
which is a little bit unique.
Yeah, it definitely is, and I liked it because that's how I'm used to it.
Yeah, and how does it work? Talk a little bit about the stigma of starting in tier 3 and moving up. Certainly, there's a lot of players that goes and play EHL, NA3, or USPHL, and hoping that, okay, I'm gonna not go play. They go from U16, they go into U18, and instead of playing U18 AAA, they go into tier 3 juniors, but then they get stuck.
Yeah, that's the case. You have to be careful moving to juniors in the United States too early. Otherwise, like you said, they're trying to get moved up. I mean, if they go there as an 05, they might not get as many looks as you do in U18.
Yeah. And if we go and look at where are the players that are playing at the D1 level, the majority, if you go to the rosters for the tier 1 US junior leagues, which is USHL, pretty much everybody on that roster are D1 commits. There's a few. I would say 90% of the players at the USHL have some sort of D1 commitment.
Yeah.
But the second league then has the majority. When you're looking at the numbers of D1 commitments, the higher number is coming from the North American Hockey League.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot more teams, but the percentage, of course, the majority of the players that are playing in USHL are going D1.
Yeah.
And then if we look at the rosters at the North American Hockey League, it's D3 and D1 commits.
Yeah.
But then if we're looking at the tier 3 level, there's very few D1 commits that go and play tier 3.
So to me, USHL and the North American Hockey League is pretty much the same league. They're both super skilled, super fast. They both remind of J20 super. What is it? Super
League, or now it's called National, J20 National.
Yeah, they both are pretty much the same level as that, and then it's a big jump to tier 3, I would say.
Yeah, there's a big jump from tier 3 versus tier 1 and tier 2.
Absolutely, in my opinion, yeah.
Yeah. And I think the other thing to address is that the age difference. The USHL is a little younger age group, but it's the elite of the elite in the US.
Yeah, so mostly in the USHL, it's young players that played 16, been scouted early, in an early age, that has committed also in an early age.
Yep.
So usually, if you are committed at that young of age, you will go to the USHL.
And then the North American Hockey League, I mean, if you make we're going to talk about how do you make the North American roster once you've been tendered, and we'll talk a little bit about the tender process too. But let's say you make the roster next year as an 05, you have 3 years of eligibility in the North American Hockey League. That's still pretty early.
Oh yeah, it's very early, and
it's an older league. It's amazing if we pull up and you can go to Elite Prospects and look at how many players are playing in the North American Hockey League this year. Of course, the equivalent is going to be then the 04 birth year this year. And there's very few 04s that are playing in the North American Hockey League. Next year, there'll be very few 05s.
Yeah.
So no guarantees that you're going to be on that roster, but how does it work? So you have been tendered by the New Jersey Titans. What does that mean?
The being tender means that the club they own me. So there's a draft every year. So now that they tendered me, they're protecting me from the draft. No other team can draft me during the summers. I cannot go to no other team's main camps and trying to make a spot there. So I'm stuck to New Jersey Titans. They own me.
Yeah, and that is a contract between you and that organization that you've signed.
Yes.
So, and I think that's worth mentioning that you will not be drafted because you're not eligible for the draft because you have signed a tender with the Titans.
Yep.
So now you could be drafted in the USHL.
Yes.
So you're still eligible for that. But
yes.
But I'm assuming that your plan right now is in the spring, my goal is to make the roster.
Yes, that's the goal now, to make the North American Hockey League roster.
So how does that work now? So you've got the spring season with the U18. I'm sure that the goal there is to make the nationals for AAA.
Yeah, for sure.
And then, all right, when mid-March, April is done, what does the schedule look like for you to try to make it on an all roster?
So it starts with the main camps that all the teams has going on, and since I had the tender signing, I'm obviously going to the New Jersey Titan one, and then they start with maybe 6 teams. They cut it down to 4, down to the final 2, and then from there they pick their team up.
And when does the main camp start for the Titans? Is that already in your calendar?
I actually don't have it on top of my head, but it's usually in the summer.
Yeah. So last year, let's go back for a second, because you've been to some North American Hockey League camps in the past.
Yeah, I did.
Did you go to last year to the Titans main camp?
Last year I was actually back home in Sweden during the New Jersey one, so I was not able to go.
But you've been to some of the pre-drafts, and you've been to some of the so you've already kind of been to you're familiar with the process.
Yes, I'm familiar.
And of course your brother already went through that process, so it's a little bit familiar. But just because you were tender doesn't mean that you're a shoe-in for that roster.
Not at all. I'm gonna have to still battle for that roster spot.
And do you know how many D spots how many does the Titans typically? How many is on the roster from a defenseman standpoint?
I think they have 8 or 9 roster defensemen. They have 8 and then 9 including with my roster.
6, 7, 8, 9. So yeah, so I'm looking at there now. So the O2s are aging out. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 of the 9 are aging out this year.
Yeah.
So they got some holes to fill.
Yeah, they definitely do. Have a lot of guys leaving.
But that's good for you. You're going to be in a good spot, and then they're going to be bringing in free agents as well, right?
Yep. They're going to scout. They're going to get to work.
So tenders, draft picks, affiliates, and free agents are going to all come to the camp, right?
Yep.
And then what? So so what's the backup plan if you don't make that roster? What's the backup plan?
If I don't make the roster for the next year, I have a good feeling about the organization. So I'll probably take the second year of U18 here and keep working.
Yep. I got a feeling that you're going to be battling pretty hard, and I wouldn't be surprised if you're going to make that roster spot. We're going to keep an eye on it for sure. But so what do you think is the biggest difference now when you're competing and you're battling in practices, both with U18 and also with the NAHL team? What's the biggest difference between the U18 AAA and the NAHL? Since you're practicing with both?
The NAHL, it's a huge step. The physicality is insane. I mean, they hit on every single play. The speed, the skills. I mean, I'm practicing with D1 commits, and the skill they have is just ridiculous.
And how does that? I mean, was that eye-opening when you first stepped on the ice with them?
Absolutely. I mean, I was actually able to skate with the team last year that my brother was on, and they had a bunch of D1 commits, and it was just crazy to see how good and skilled they are.
And how did that affect you? I mean, I'm sure it's tough to compete when you're younger and you had the size, but you don't have the experience. But does that intimidate you? Does that make you? What motivates you most?
The weight's making me better and making my game better. I mean, defending against the D1 commit is obviously better than defending at a U18 player.
Yeah.
So it's helping me a lot too.
And what about off ice? How does that? I mean, you've always been a big guy, but how does that affect you off the ice? What's the focus?
The focus off the ice is right now to actually gain a couple of pounds.
Yeah.
And to keep my feet up with that. As soon as you gain weight, you have to get your feet comfortable with moving as fast. So that's pretty much the goal right now, is to keep my feet moving.
Yep. No, I think it's great. It's going to be interesting to follow you. I appreciate you being a guest, and it's interesting. When we look at kind of the response of who listens to the podcast, twice as many people listen when there's actual players. So I try to mix it up, and we've had a few now on here, and with a mixture. So we're setting it up to be following, and we may do an episode where we're just doing some check-ins on how's Jack doing. We just had Kim Hilmerson on, who's playing with the Maine Nordiques, who's an 05.
Oh yeah.
And then we got a Swedish kid that is playing J20. Shinander plays in Olofström. So we're going to try to do some more. more actual junior players, and it's fun to follow for sure. So, Lucas, thank you for jumping on, and we'll make sure if you want to go in. Lucas is with a C, and it has 2 S's in the afternoons in the last name. So if you want to look him up.
Yeah, thank you so much.